bring the first caller on the line. I think this is a 213 area code.
Thanks, y'all.
Caller, you're on the line. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
This is Jeremy from The Antidote. I first wanted to thank you, Whitney, for the series of articles that you've written that are really some of the most crucial articles that have been written this entire year in terms of bolting down these key historical elements that fit a current understanding of what the Epstein group or Epstein gang really is in the current political context to our historical context. And then one other applause I wanted to give you was the article that you wrote about Paul Singer, too, that really I think is part and parcel of what the Epstein gang was doing, too, which has to do with technology and economic transfer to Israel. And so I just wanted to bring up a couple avenues of investigation and see what you thought of them.
Sure.
This history of the mega group and the way you traced it back to, through Max Fisher and Rosenstiel, I think is crucial. I had learned from John Swin, an investigator, about the mentor, I guess, to Max Fisher, Sam the Banana Man Zamuri, who, is in United Fruit, and he turns out to be the guy who architects the overthrow of Jacobo Arbenz
of Guatemala
in 1954. So what's interesting is we can see this mega group network that is very obviously transnational, heavily Zionist, at the heart of even some of the biggest incursions of U.S. imperialism. And so I was wondering whether you've looked into or might be willing to look into this connection of Robert Maxwell to Semyon Mogilevich in this period of the end of the Soviet Union as the national security types and the Eurasian organized criminals are looking to Maxwell to help them organize their global money laundering effort. I think this all ties into like Trump Toronto and the 1995 Tel Aviv meeting with Mogilevich and all the Eurasian gangsters. It's laid out pretty well in Robert Friedman's book, Red Mafia. That's one avenue, and I don't know if you want to talk about that first or whether I should bring in the second avenue first.
I am aware that Robert Maxwell had connections to Russian organized crime and that there is a lot of crossover there, but I haven't been focusing that on my piece in particular because I'm trying to keep it to 4 pieces, and I haven't even talked about the Democrats in the U.S., right? So I'm trying to keep it as concise as possible, but I think I would really like to see if possible, people that are interested or journalists that are interested build off of my work and look at Robert Maxwell as a figure in exploring the connections of this to Russian organized crime. Let's also remember, too, that I believe Robert Maxwell was also a mentor in some ways to Bill Browder, who is a controversial figure in Russia and also in the United States. So anyone that has investigated that, I know there's several journalists that have investigated Bill Browder for some time. I definitely think there is merit to that, but unfortunately, because of limitations for time and also my expertise, I am not overly familiar with Russian politics or Russian history. I'm more familiar with stuff going on in the Middle East and in the U.S. and also in Latin America. So I'm trying to stick, best to what I know when I'm talking about, in-depth historical matters like I do in my series. But I definitely think someone with a better handle on that sort of stuff, those are definitely some places to start, and they warrant investigation. Some people have said that I am, trying to protect Russia and Putin by not including him in my series, but really it was a decision I made because I'm not well versed on that. So I really hope that someone who is and has the ability and the knowledge, sort of picks up from some of the connections I lay out in my piece and sort of moves that over, because it's also important to point out, with the mega group, these are sort of a transnational group that have a lot of political influence in the U.S. and Israel. But there are also, a lot of Israeli oligarchs that are also Israeli Russian oligarchs. There are many of those. And so I think that is definitely another piece of the puzzle that because of, as I mentioned, my limitations, I won't be taking a look at, but I think it is definitely just as worthy as everything else that I have laid out in my piece, and I will be laying out in part 4. So I hope that was a satisfactory answer.
Oh, I appreciate that answer a lot. And I think that you have bolted down this U.S. and Israeli context of this Epstein group, and especially tying it to Wexner. And that should be the focus right now. Wexner is just lawyered up, apparently, in Southern District, New York. And while I was in Iowa with Greg talking to some of the presidential candidates, I just wanted to let you know, I mentioned your article to Joe Sestak, who's a former naval commander who was very interested in it. His people were trying to push him onwards and said, we're not going to be talking about Epstein, but he's very interested in it. So I'm going to send that on to his people, a link to your article about the Wexner aspect. You're welcome. Because what I think the key right now is to show that this mega group focused around Wexner was the primary propaganda push in terms of the policy coup to push us into war in Iraq. So this does involve the sexual violence towards to girls, but it's also part and parcel of the political control operation that helps deliver such horrific policy as the Iraq War via this Israeli lobby. And then final thing I just wanted to leave you with is to continue with this technology avenue that you brought up in your article, including the
I absolutely plan to do that. I hope it's I have time in a separate article, or I get approval from my boss, because I honestly think from research I've been conducting that Carbine is just one of several other companies that are being marketed as a solution to mass shootings in the United States. Another one to look at is called Gabriel, which has connections to several Israeli military intelligence companies, and is also a smartphone app involved in that has the potential for surveillance because of the people involved in the company. And Carbine's another one, and they're being, in sort of this, climate of fear that's being that sort of exists now in the United States around mass shootings. This is sort of being marketed as the solution. And so I think there may be something to that. And as you mentioned, my Paul Singer article, this significantly predates my Epstein series by a few months. But I would encourage people to take a look. If you search for Paul Singer on MintPressNews.com, you will find that article. Please take time to read it. Another article that ties over into Israeli military intelligence ties to several tech startups and large technology companies. I have an article about Microsoft's Election Guard software, which they are pushing to have implemented nationwide in the United States. That also has deep ties to Unit 8200, which is like Israel's NSA. And so I would encourage people to please take a look at that article as well to get a little another perspective on what I talk about Carbine specifically in part 3 of my series on Jeffrey Epstein.
That your Microsoft article about Election Guard is key, especially with Microsoft bidding to be the corporate cloud provider for the Pentagon.
For the Pentagon,
Jedi
exactly.
Cloud. Yeah.
All of the cloud computing and all of the cloud computing for Microsoft is currently their whole cloud division is actually based in Israel and is being run by a former officer in Unit 8200. Which is quite startling when you consider that, the Pentagon may very well have its entire cloud based in a foreign country, and there has been no outrage raised about that at all.
Shocking.
From what I've seen.
Jeremy, thank you. Thank you so much for calling in. I hate to cut you off, but we've got a couple more callers that we want to bring on. So thank you for calling in once again. If you do want to call in and ask Whitney or myself a question, the number is 319-527-5016. So we're going to take a caller with a 718 area code.